welcome to another episode of Jacob's House of Rock. And today is the first part in a new series I'll be doing. In this series, I'll be modding this Squire Stratocaster to be of as close an equivalent as I can to an American Strat. So this isn't something new. There's a lot of videos of people doing similar things, but they're all of them are different, and they're all pretty interesting in their own right. And since I was thinking about doing this myself, I figured this would be a great topic for a series, because yeah, it's something that's pretty easy to do from what I've gathered, and pretty effective, and you can get a really great instrument from doing this. So the one that I have here, its serial number starts with CXS, so I don't really know much about it, but you can look those up. And the good thing about this one, aside from the fact that it has a really good neck and plays really nicely just how it is, I managed to get this one for a really good price at a garage sale about a year ago. And yeah, this guitar has been just one of my favorite guitars that I've been using lately. So but I did feel sort of the limitations of the pickups and the hardware and stuff that it has in it, so it really warrants an upgrade. But yeah, the good thing about this particular model of Squire is the thickness of the body. So if we take a ruler, can have a look that the thickness of this one's body, I'll go in centimeters and inches. So the thickness is about 1 3/4 inches, which is the standard thickness of an actual US Strat. Most Squires have a thickness of 1.5 inches. So there's a quarter inch thicker for this one than most Squires, which is really important if you want it really just makes it easier if you want to replace the tremolo block, which is something that I'll be doing in this, because the depth of that hole is determined by the thickness of the body, and in order to fit most of the aftermarket ones, it really helps to have a thicker body. Another thing, well, first I'll just say that since I use the metric system living in Australia, I'll just say that the thickness of this one is about 4.5 centimeters. So that's how thick the body of this one is. So it's got a nice chunky feeling to it. Really love that about this Squire. So I'm gonna go over I'll be doing this as a series in parts, because I feel like I could do this all in one video, but I feel like I'm just gonna too impatient, basically. So I'm gonna start off sort of detailing the process of how you would start a project like this. So I got lucky. This neck is really good, and the frets are nice and leveled, and there's no sharpness on the edge of them. You could like sand down the edges of the frets if they were a bit pointy. This one's really good, so I don't need to do that. I might do a video on how to do that in future on some other guitars, but we'll see. If you go looking online, you'll find some good videos for that. So first of all, the things that this guitar that I'm going to change on this guitar is a lot. It's pretty much everything. I'm gonna be keeping the pick guard, the body, and the neck, of course, and I've already done a couple of changes to this one, which is I added roller string trees. For those of you who don't know what those are, I'll just show you that real quick. There's a couple of different designs, but basically these have these little bits that hold the strings down so they angled correctly over the nut here. These usually they're just little bent bits of metal. Like I have on this guitar here. I'll just grab it and show you guys. So this is a random Strat copy they've done a little bit of a carving job on in the past, so I'm quite proud of how that turned out. But you know, other than that, it's a good little guitar, but nothing too special. But if we look at the string trees here, you can see there's just two little bits of metal here, and the problem with those is when you're using the tremolo system, or, well, technically it should be a vibrato, so it's not actually a tremolo effect, but it's called tremolo for whatever reason. When you're using this, what happens is the strings, they'll be tightened. When you pull it back, the strings will be tightened and they'll move under the string trees here. And the problem is, when you loosen it again, sometimes the strings can get caught under this part here, and it's not really ideal. You can lubricate it and all that sort of stuff, but ideally the less contact you have there, the less friction, the more flowing it'll be, the better you'll stay in tune, which is a big issue when you're using a tremolo. So that's one little mod that I did to this. You can just buy these off eBay or AliExpress for a couple of dollars, or practically nothing, and they're really good, and I highly recommend those. That's something that doesn't come stock on US instruments, but my goal for this one isn't to make this exactly like a US instrument. It's to make it of as close a quality as I can for as little as I can, basically. Although I did kind of go a bit all out. Since it is my birthday, I'm like, well, since I'm already changing this, I may as well change this and change this. So anyway, I'll have a big list in the description of everything I got, and you can check that out and maybe get it for yourself. So in speaking about the tuning stability, another thing that I decided to go with was I'm going to try out a bone nut. So on typical Squires and most instruments of this sort, they come with plastic nuts. They work fine if you keep them well lubricated and you make sure they're, you know, sanded and polished properly, the string slots, so the strings can slide. There really isn't much of an issue, but overall I hear that the tuning stability does go up, as well as the tone. You have a little bit more brightness and clarity in the tone of a bone nut because it's a more dense material. And the thing is, when you change out the nut on an instrument, you'll only hear the difference when you're actually playing open notes. Pardon, I've got the guitar strings completely slack now because I was actually opening up the guitar body here and looking at some elements of the bridge, which I'll show you soon. So I've kind of taken it apart a little bit, so it's not really functioning right now, but still doesn't really matter. But yeah, so I'm going to be trying out bone nuts. So they're literally made of bone, and I got like a nice little deal on those on AliExpress. I no idea what the quality will be, but again, they got good reviews, so I'm hoping that they'll be really good, and it may need some adjustment when you're putting it in and all that, but I will detail that when they arrive and when I do this myself. So with tuning stability, these two things are very important. The nut is often the place where there's problems, more so than anything else. So you got to just make sure that stuff flows through here when you're using tremolo pretty well. And the third thing that I did, that I've ordered, is new tuners. These tuners aren't terrible, although I had to replace one of them because it was just stuck. And should I show you guys? These are the bits and bobs from the guitar that are currently not on it, including that one tuner that I replaced with another tuner that I just had lying around from another sort of guitar I was working on, carving the body. It's been lying like that for a couple of years because it takes forever and I just haven't been able to get to it. So I borrowed one of its tuners to, you can see that one that's a bit different up here. The rest of them actually say Squire on them. And I'm not really sure what ratio these ones are. For those of you who don't know, with tuners, what's very important is the higher the tuning ratio, the more stable your tuning will be, and the more smooth and the more precise you can make it. Most really cheap tuners, from what I hear, are like around 10 to 14 to 1, something like that. 10 to 1 is not the best, 14 to 1 is getting pretty good, and then like the higher end ones tend to be from like 15 to 18 or 19 to 1, something like that. And what that basically means is how many full turns of this, of the peg here to the machine head here, turning one full turn. So I'm assuming these are like 14 to 1, something like that. So you turn this 14 times for this part here to turn one full rotation. And what I did was I went looking on AliExpress, I went looking for Wilkinson tuners at first, and then I found a brand that seemed to be pretty much exactly the same as the Wilkinson tuners, made in Korea as well. Look like they have the same packaging. So I'm assuming they're just tuners that are made in the same factory but just not branded as Wilkinson. And they were for a very good price, and they were locking tuners. So I'll have a link in the description to those. They also had very good reviews and a very reasonable price for those. And for those of you who don't know what locking tuners are or what they do or how you use them, I've never used them myself, but I'll quickly explain. So they don't really lock your tuning like, say, a locking nut would once you've tuned it. That's not what they do, which is a common misconception. What they actually do is, the way you would use them is you pull your string through the string hole and just keep it sort of fairly tight, like just by hand, and you don't have to wrap the string around the pole at all. You just have a little knob under here that you tighten, which actually has a little pin that comes through the inside of the tuner and clamps the string in place. Now, what that does is two things. It makes changing strings very quick, because you don't have to figure out how much length of wire you have to put, how you have to wind it on correctly and all that stuff, which works fine if you do it right. But the problem of having lots of windings around the pole is that when you have a tremolo or something going, there's potential in those windings to come slack and to move and shift, which will change the tuning, and that's not ideal. So I figured, since they were pretty much, a very good price, and only like I don't know, $4 or $5 more than the non-locking tuner equivalents that I could find, I figured I'd go with the locking tuners. And they also had a really good ratio of 19 to 1, I think. So yeah, they, by all intents and purposes, they look good. I also made very sure that the measurements lined up the same as the original tuners, so that they fit in the holes and they just be, swap in replacements, no issue there. So it's very important to measure everything and make sure it'll fit. So yeah, that's so far. This is going to have 19 to 1 ratio locking tuners, has the roller string trees and a brand new bone nut. So that's all the stuff I'm going to change down on the headstock area. As for the body, we have a lot of new stuff going on. For one thing, I'll be changing out the tremolo block inside the bridge. So I have the back of this attached, but if I remember to do this in editing, I will cut away, and then this will be open in a sec, and then I'll be able to show you guys why I'm doing this. Alright guys, so it's been about a minute. I've taken off this back plate here. One thing I love about this guitar is actually the pickguards are a really pretty color. They have a nice 3-ply with the, hold on if it focuses, with the black and white stripes on the edges, and they match really nicely on the front and the back. It's really nice. So I've taken off this, and you can see the stock bridge. Now it's got that zinc block, so that is just a cast piece of zinc, and you put your strings through these holes, and it's got the springs that hold tension on it back here. And the problem with this one is it's very thin. It's very thin, and it doesn't sustain very well, at least compared to something like a steel or a brass block. Also, this one's pretty shallow because it's probably designed for the other kinds of Squires. And the one that I went for, because I was looking at all these fancy bridges and all this stuff, and the problems you'd find with changing out the whole bridge on a Squire is that the screw spacing, the actual mounting screws to the body on the top here, these are a little bit smaller than a US Fender bridge, and most of the high-end aftermarket bridges are made to fit a US guitar. So, and they're the ones with the big brass blocks, and that's kind of what you want in a good tremolo bridge. So I'll just I quickly disassembled the bridge. I took out the little mounting screws that held the saddles in place. These saddles are fine. I was actually thinking about putting in roller saddles, but I did some research on those, and I hear that because the whole bridge actually moves with the string, you don't really need the rolling wheel action. That might help a little bit, but with like tuning stability, but the main problem is that they kind of take away some of the punch to the tone and have a slightly thinner sound. So I figured, since these ones work, I don't really have a problem with them, that I'm gonna keep these stock. In fact, these are probably better than the bent metal saddles that a lot of the vintage style Fender bridges have. So basically, the bigger and the more dense these are, probably the better as well. But yeah, so make sure that you can fit whatever block you're putting in here. If you get one that's if you're using a thinner body Squire, what you need to do is you need to take this bit off, which a lot of people do anyway, just for changing out the strings. So it's not much of a big deal, but just be mindful of that and measure everything before you order something. So most good sellers will have accurate measurements of the different blocks and stuff, and I found that as opposed to buying a whole bridge, it was much more affordable to buy a new solid brass block that was made to fit in one of these things. So I think it was intended to go in a Mexican Fender Strat. So the screw spacing seemed to fit on with all the screws on the bridge for the actual block. I carefully checked that with a ruler, and that's why I took these bits off, so I can just move all of these up. Because I didn't want to take my strings off, because I'm going to put this back together and still play on it before everything arrives in like a month or something. Because that's how long, unfortunately, stuff from China tends to take. And this last one, I'm just going to leave. But so basically what you need to do is, you see on the bridge, you have those 6 mounting screws that attaches this thing to the body. And the way you measure those is you measure from the middle of the screw on either side and see how wide it is. So for mine, and most import sort of Strat copies, most import guitars use metric measurements, and they will have the same sort of measurements here. Hold on. So you can just you can even do this without removing the saddles. I removed those so I can get to the other screws, but we'll get to those in a sec. But this one, measures at about 5.2 millimeters from the middle, the very center of the little X in both the outer screws. So that's the standard measurement for the spacing for Squires, for the mounting screws. So 5.2 millimeters. Unfortunately, like I said, most higher end aftermarket bridges or official Fender ones are 5.6 millimeters. So if you're really keen on installing a whole new bridge, you will have to re-drill the holes. So you have to fill these up with like get some like wood glue and some matchsticks or something and fill those holes up. Then basically you need to drill new holes. And yeah, if you're really keen, that can probably be done. I haven't done it myself, but I've had people have got good results with that. But you know, it's just an extra bit of hassle that I didn't really feel like I wanted to do. So what I did is I'm keeping the whole top of this bridge, the steel plate here and the saddles, they're all fine. They work great. There's nothing wrong with them. So what I'm going to be doing is you see the other three screws here. When you unscrew those, the block, that cheap zinc block, you can remove that, and I'm going to be putting on a new brass block. So I just had to measure out the distance between these, and these ones comes to about 4.1 mil, something like that, around that measurement. I think the one that I bought had like about a mil off of what I measured out by eye here, but you know, it's kind of hard to tell, and it should probably work itself out once we get it in. So I'm really hoping that'll work out. And they also gave the measurements of the actual string spacing, because another thing, like Wilkinson, they make whole bridges with nice steel blocks, and I was looking into those. But you know, the string space, the screws that you put into the body, they were with the American measurements, so 5.6 millimeters for these. And they also had a problem with the holes that the actual strings go through. They weren't in a straight line, they were kind of moved back and forth to help with tuning, but that means you need this plate to be the same, to have the same holes in it as that block. So you either need to drill through the steel if you were installing that block, or just get a different block, or change out the whole bridge, which again involves filling in the holes that you had in the body and re-drilling new ones to mount it. So I found that I just measured up the holes in this bridge plate really well, and then found a block that fits. And the good thing is, again, like I said, my body on this guitar is thick enough to fit that block, because it would stick out of a normal Squire, the one that I have, that I've linked in the description below. So I've heard that Guitar Fetish makes blocks that will fit in thinner Squires with no problem. So before I measured my Squire, how thick the body on my Squire was, I assumed I needed that one. But the problem is, since I live in Australia, the postage costs more than the actual block itself. So it costs like $30 to post that, and the block only costs like $25. It's not worth it to me when I can get another block for the same price from China that fits in this one. So that's why I'm really happy that the body is a good thickness and everything fits. So another thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be changing out the pickups. I found, through a bit of research and a bit of looking around on AliExpress, I found a brand of pickups that were very highly recommended for very, very inexpensive prices. So, you know, Alnico 5 vintage, as like vintage high output replica sort of Fender pickups by a company called Donlis. Now, every review of those has been really praising their quality. They have just like very positive positive reaction. There's not too much said about them, unfortunately, but I will be doing a review of those when they come in, and you know, testing those out. So I'll have a link in the description for that. Not much more to say about those at the moment. They have, you know, the staggered pole pieces, which the one on the B string looks a little bit too sunk in for my liking, but I don't know. I guess I'm hoping that it won't affect the sound negatively in any way, and since they're getting so much praise, that maybe it'll be okay. But yeah, so I'm changing out those pickups, and I'm also gonna be changing out, since I went this far, I figured I may as well just change out all the electronics as well, make it, you know, Fender correct, even though, like, I think aside from the values of the pots and the capacitor, the actual branding and all that doesn't make too much of a difference. But I ended up, because I'm going all out, and since it's my birthday, I figured I'd get the CTS Pots, I'd get the orange drop capacitor. I know it doesn't matter, but it only costs like $1 or $2 extra, so. And I'm replacing the switch, even though there's not much wrong with this one, and the Switchcraft jack. So I'll have links in the description where I got that for people living in Australia. There's a pretty good seller located in New South Wales on eBay that sells that sort of stuff, and has been the best prices I could find, at least, for it in Australia. So yeah, that's basically it. So I'm hoping when I've done all that, this will be a really nice guitar. And oh, another thing I should mention is stock in Squires, these are ceramic magnet pickups. Unfortunately, they don't sound bad, but they don't sound the best either. They're pretty bright. The tone controls are made so they don't affect the bridge pickup. I'll be changing that too. The pickups that I'm going to be installing the Donlis ones, you know, alnico 5. They got they're wound to really good specifications, and apparently the capacitance is really low, so they're like scatter wound pickups, and they have the cloth wire and everything, which doesn't really make a difference, but it's kind of fancy. So it should be all good. And one very important thing is the pots in these guitars. For some reason, they are 500K, which does not work as well with single coil pickups, because single coil pickups tend to be very bright, and the 500K pots are used with humbuckers in order to brighten them up. 250K pots, audio taper 250K pots is what you want in a Strat type guitar, but you know, these are audio 500K pots, like the little mini ones. So yeah, I'm going to be replacing these with the full-size CTS 250K audio taper pots. Another very important thing is you need to make sure you have tone knobs that can fit on those CTS pots, and you might have to do a little bit of routing, well, not real routing, but sort of scratch out the holes for the tone knobs that go through the pick guard just a little bit more, because they're CTS pots. The actual hole that they need is a little bit bigger, since they use imperial measurements and not metric. And yeah, like the most cheap aftermarket tone knobs are designed for metric pots, which have like, I think, 5mm shaft diameter when you put them on, with different sort of they have different, I forgot what it's called, but it's like the little lines, the textures at the top. They have a different amount of those little lines than these ones do. So these will be the 5mm ones, or there might be 6mm, I forgot. But CTS ones, they have 6.3mm, so you you kind of have to get different knobs, which are also kind of hard to find in Australia, for at least like anywhere as cheap as these ones would be. But yeah, so something to bear in mind. And yeah, that's about it. So I'll get back to you guys with the next episode when I finally start working on this thing, and I'll do sort of like I'll show you guys all the process and everything. Also be oiling the fretboard and and cleaning that up and all the standard setup stuff later on. And if you're interested in this sort of stuff, I have another video. It's one of my earlier videos, so it's not the best, but I did the same sort of procedure on my Fender Mexican jazz bass, converting it to as close as I can to an American standard sort of 60s jazz bass. So do check that video out. I go through a lot of the stuff, like with the CTS Pots and the wiring and all that, and the procedure and everything. I don't do everything as well as I could have. Like, I used very thick wire then for all the electronics, and I really should have used a thinner gauge of wire, because it doesn't make a difference in the sound quality, but it makes it a lot easier to work with. So I recommend you watching that video and watching this series and watching me learn from my mistakes and getting better and getting a really top-notch instrument out of a $30 Squire Stratocaster. So thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, keep on rocking, and bye.